Well, first, I feel very happy to stand right now in the center of the world and the universe. And yes, I feel also very honored, you know, when you get invited to speak about what you feel passionate about. And so I will try to share my passion tonight. And that passion about this new field, this new research field, collective intelligence. I can't give a definition of collective intelligence, just like we don't have a definition for intelligence. We can talk about manifestations of intelligence. So for instance, I can say we have collective intelligence in this very room as some kind of structure, doing something together right now, listening to someone, and maybe doing other things later. So collective intelligence happens when you have a group of individuals, animals, humans, doesn't matter, small or big, and where they want to accomplish something together, and they do it in such a way that they operate like a single body. So for instance, a jazz band, when you have a perfect music band, then you have something that looks like a single body. Or an ant colony, or a flock of birds, or bacterias, when they play by thousands and tens of thousands together and have a coherent behavior. We all have manifestations of collective intelligence. And life cannot exist without collective intelligence. It comes as a part of life itself. And I became absolutely passionate about this, especially when I became one of those who made the internet happen in France, in the country of France. And I had this very interesting point of observation where I could see how technology can enhance, can facilitate the emergence of new social structures and new social bodies. And so one day I decided I would leave everything and do just that, research and development. And it led me to understand, of course, collective intelligence as a new field, as a new discipline, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but also mostly to see that our species, and I don't just say our civilization, but I say our species now experiences a deep transformation, a deep evolution, not just culture, the species itself. And I would like to share why, of course, not just, you know, make it an opinion. I don't have a personal opinion on that, but just to show the facts, the hard facts, by looking at the lens of collective intelligence. And then, of course, it leads to questions. If we really understand, if we have words to describe this evolution, well, so what do we do? What do we do as individuals? What do we do as collectives? How do we build something different together? What do we build? So I propose that I start in the first place to give you some hints, some, I would say, fundamentals about collective intelligence. We have different forms of collective intelligence, and I would like to share them. And then I would like to go into deeper questions. Why does it affect us today? Why do we feel it today, right now, even without having any words to describe what we experience? So, we have 63 different forms of collective intelligence, and I will go through each and one of them. 63? No, 4. Okay. 4. I want to start with this first one. Maybe and likely the oldest one of collective intelligence, when you have a high number of individuals and they kind of play together at the same time. They don't have much individuation. You know, as a fish here, you follow the next fish here, and so on and so on. They all look the same, more or less. And I could say the same with an ant colony, or a flock of birds, or those big herds when you have, you know, thousands and thousands of animals, you know, running together. Well, more or less, you pay attention to what you have around you. You follow the stream. You, of course, avoid the dangers. And you don't have much individual freedom, either by design, like an ant. You know, an ant can do some specific tasks, but won't do much apart from that. As a fish here also, you follow the stream. But also sometimes by circumstances. So this form of collective intelligence, we call it swarm collective intelligence, swarm collective intelligence. I could have said, flock or school, whatever, but okay, we stayed for swarm collective intelligence. Remember, a big number of people or individuals, but not super individualized. Now, however, as a collective as a whole, it can have a super high collective intelligence. Look at an ant colony, what it can accomplish, the level of adaptability, the flexibility, the plasticity that it has. Question: do we have this kind of configuration as human beings? What do you think? Sometimes, huh? Yeah. What would you think about when we have this kind of configuration? Lots and lots of people. Sorry?
Not ideal.
Not ideal, So, well, let's look at that, for instance. New York Marathon, or a street protest, whatever, when you have thousands of people going into the street, and then you follow the stream, okay? Or maybe something not as pleasant that you may have experienced no later than today. All right? Well, car traffic, or when we go in the subway, all these things. Now, of course, when we stand in the car here just, frustrated, having so little freedom, just follow the stream, we feel kind of upset, angry. But look at the global result. You can fill up and empty a whole city in one day, twice a day. Try to plan that, okay? So you see, you may not have much freedom of even intelligence at the individual level, but somehow at the emerging level, you may have a huge amount of intelligence. And swarm collective intelligence allows that, of course, allows for that. Now, I would like to speak about the second one, more important, more interesting for us. This one. Oh, cute, huh? Okay, well, here we have something quite opposite. We have a small group of people or individuals and highly individualized. We have the tribe, we have the clan or the village, the team, whatever. You will never see a big number of individuals there. Okay, so you can think of an elephant family or a clan of big cats or gorillas. Usually mostly the evolved mammals or some birds as well. They will evolve in small groups, and each and every one has a perception of everyone else. Of course, if we want to see configurations in the human world, a jazz band gives us the perfect vision for that. I really love this picture here. I really invite you to look at it and see how immediately we can feel, we have like a natural empathy that we would not have for other forms of collective intelligence because we come from this form of collective intelligence. You see, we can see that every player has a strong individuation. They really know, each and every one of them, what to do. They have their own persona, their own personality, their own style. They know the rules. They play by the rules of jazz. And they have a perception of each other individually. But also they have something even more important than that, and I really want to insist on this one, something that we call holopticism. Holopticism. I will just display the word here. Holopticism stands for holos, holistic, and opticism, see the whole. Okay, see the whole. So as a trained player in a sports team or as a jazz player here, you need two qualities that makes you a good player or a good musician. One, you need to play your instrument or the ball very well, of course, but also you have this special training and capacity and skill to see the whole, to understand what your team will do in the next few seconds or minutes. You have a sense, a body sense of what it means. Okay, holopticism. And that leads to a very important question because each and every time we would talk about an organization, a big company, or a street protest, whatever form of collective intelligence, we want to question what kind of holopticism do we have? Because remember, in this context of the jazz band, back to the jazz band here, these guys here, they don't need a chain of command. They don't need to obey blindly to a chain of command. you have some kind of intersection between the individual self, the individuality, and also the play, the game with the whole. So you have a back and forth complex relationship between the individual level and the collective whole. Now, what kind of limitations would you see there? When does it not work anymore? Any idea? Well, let's say we don't have, I don't know, this guy here anymore. Do they stop playing? No. So it has lots of resilience and adaptability, right?
If he starts to play something else, then the group is finished.
Okay, so like if you say, well, someone plays something else and they may lose the group, okay, then you talk about some kind of pathology, or you may have, this guy here deciding that he wants to, put oppression on the group. Well, you have some kind of pathology which you can have on any kind of collective intelligence. It may dysfunction, like my body, like life, okay? But I would invite you to think about number. If we have too many musicians, what happens?
Well, you need a conductor.
You need a conductor. You go into symphonic orchestra. You see, something else has to emerge as a social design, okay? So number one, you have number, limitation of number. Think of a sports where you ask 50 players to play on the field. You still have, well, you have transparency. You can see everyone, right? Like in this room, like if we wanted to play soccer together, we would have some issues. We can see we have transparency, but we don't have holopticism. We don't have the sense of the whole because our cognitive functions don't work there anymore. We have some kind of limitations. And the second limitation here, distance. These guys here need to feel one another, to connect with one another, to sense one another. So whether they do it by physical proximity or some kind of remote connection, like a squad could do in the army, but at least they need to have this strong, deep level of connection, and then it works. And it stops working when we go into big numbers. And so that leads to the next form of collective intelligence, because in nature, when a clan or a small family becomes bigger, what happens? They split, right? And usually they will seed some other clan somewhere, okay? But humanity had another strategy, very unique. It led to the next form of collective intelligence that we call the third form of collective intelligence, pyramidal collective intelligence. And here you have a very, very different social order here, because first it needs social classes or castes. The first forms you will see in every kind of civilization. It doesn't matter whether we look at the Chinese or the Egyptians or South American pre-Columbian, civilizations. You will always see some kind of god or human god, divinity at the top, and then a second level of high priests, and nobles and nobility, and then another layer of more like the merchants, the traders, and then another layer of the farmers, the people of the land, and then one bottom layer of the workers, the slaves, those that we will use, the prisoners of war, for instance, that we will use to do any kind of very harsh tasks, okay? Now we have these first forms here appearing with the writing as the core technology that enabled the possibility to operate at distance in time and distance in space, which you cannot do with oral traditions. You can only have those big organizations with a core technology called the writing. And then it enabled messaging, the communication, but also currencies, money, because you write about debt, like I owe you something, and that has a value that can also circulate as a banknote, for instance, okay? Now, I showed like an early kind of form here, but today, if I want to make a more like a scheme of what it really looks like in pyramidal organizations, and especially of organizations of today, if you think of a company, well, you have at the top executive team, meeting regularly, and then you may have departments there, and services. Okay, very conventional thing. You would also see that in a government, same thing. You have, ministries here, and so on, and different administrations. Okay, you still have the pyramidal structures with a chain of command. So what those guys will decide here, and that includes a CEO at the top, or a president, whatever, then we'll have to go into a chain of command. So you see here we have a very, very different kind of structure. Question, do we have holopticism here? No. We have something different that we call the opposite, panopticism. Panopticism, that means panoramic. You stand at the top of the mountain here, and you can see everything, but you don't have much detail there. You don't have much precision. Or you stand at the bottom of the pyramid or the mountain, and then you have the detail, but you don't have the global view, the global understanding, with all the gradients in between, of course. And of course, because you have chains of command and panopticism, then that asks the questions about individual sovereignty. And now I would like to slow down a little bit before going into the next form of collective intelligence. Because I said, okay, our species has operated in pyramidal collective intelligence for the past 5,000 years, since the invention of the writing. And now we kind of hit a wall here. Something changes. And I would like to speak to that a little bit, because it speaks to the symptoms of what we experience today in our evolutionary process. Evolution usually happens when some kind of species or social organization hits a wall. It doesn't work anymore. It has too much complexity, and some new order has to emerge, or collapse, or emerge. And we have so much pyramidal collective intelligence today that it has created such a level of complexity that it doesn't work that much anymore. Everywhere I go in the world, when I speak with CEOs, they say, well, I have this job as a CEO, but I don't know what happens. I don't know how to lead those things. It has too much complexity. Everywhere I go in the world, if I come back to my previous slide here, you ask anyone here, well, do you feel in your full sovereignty? Most people will say, well, I kind of like my job, maybe. So they may say that. Okay, all right, you like your job. Now, here, let's say you have 50 million euros on your bank account. Would you still come? No, I would not. I would do something else. Okay, what would you do? Well, I would follow my dream. I would, let's say, travel, the ocean with a sailboat, or I would want to build a school in India, or whatever. They would state their dream. Why don't you do it? Well, because I need the money for that. I don't have the money for that. Okay, so then they go and work for some kind of organization. Not that they dislike their work, but just because they have to work in this social order. So what I would like to stress here, a few things, a few flaws about pyramidal collective intelligence, not as a criticism, but understanding the limitations that we experience today. For instance, if you work in an organization like this, it has, what I said, chains of command. Chains of command, they work because you have predictable human beings, right? If you take a 5-year-old child, do we have a predictable human being? Not very much, right? A 5-year-old child, well, he wants to sleep, he sleeps, he wants to play, he plays. He wants to eat, he eats, or she, and so on. Okay? Not very predictable. You take this child and put this child for 20 years at school, highly educated, highly separated between the mental, the head that looks at the blackboard, the teacher, the authority, and highly disconnected at this level because we spend hours and hours and thousands of hours sitting and just learning how to separate the inner flows and what the social order asks us to do. Why do we need that? Not because of masochism, but just because if you want to have chains of command, that means predictable people with predictable outcomes. So predictability requires a deep, deep, deep learning process, a long one. And I see nothing wrong with that, except that when you, as coaches, you know how much people in this world today want to regain their sovereignty. They want to participate to decision making. They want to make a difference. They want to affirm their being. I don't talk about ego here, about self-affirming our true nature. And I could talk about social studies and sociology. It says exactly the very same thing, like through cultural creatives. I don't know if you heard about this term. We have different words to say that if we study populations in the world, no matter where you look at, you have a growing number of people who want to claim more and more their sovereignty. That means they become more and more unique. They become more and more themselves. They want to do more and more unique things. And all these things do not match with pyramidal collective intelligence. That means it creates a new level of complexity, social complexity, organizational complexity, that these organizations cannot provide or even embrace. Another thing also about pyramidal collective intelligence, I said, okay, it created money, wherever we look at. Money, we can see it as a very old technology. It doesn't matter we have digits or banknotes. Very, very old technology since the invention of the writing, when we can write, I owe you something. You know, if I have 10 euros in my pocket, it says that someone somewhere owes me something for the value of 10 euros. We call it debt money for this reason. Now, money as a technology, as this specific kind of technology, has a property that we call the Pareto effect. Pareto, P-A-R-E-T-O effect. That means it self-aggregates. Have you played the Monopoly game? Who has played the Monopoly game? Okay, everyone, huh? All right. Well, the more money I make, then the more I can invest. The more I invest, the more I make. The more I make, the more I invest, and so on. So money attracts money. The less money I have, the more I need to pay to the landlord, the less I have. So the less I have, the less I have. The more I have, the more I have. Okay? It has a name. We have equations for that. We call it Pareto effect. Okay? So when you play the Monopoly game, then you have someone becoming richer and richer and richer, and goes into an exponential curve. And those losing money, money, money become poorer and poorer in an exponential curve. And in the end, who do we define as the winner? The person who has the most money. But actually, in the game's theory, we call it a collective death. Because if I have all the banknotes, well, I don't have anyone else to play with. And all the other people cannot also do exchange because they don't have the tools. They have the wealth, but they don't have the tools to exchange wealth. So my point here, in pyramidal collective intelligence, we have what we call scarce currencies or organized scarcity, because you will always see, regardless the ages, regardless the story, regardless the civilization you look at, you will always have a concentration of money here, and a little less here, and less here, and less here, and less here. Always. Always. That means pyramidal collective intelligence needs to operate with some kind of scarcity model, some kind of scarcity or organized scarcity technology. And money offers that very, very well. You don't have just money, but money offers that very, very well. And again, I don't have a moral criticism here. I just want to point that if we have a concentration of power built on a concentration of resource, and you want people to have to share resources, to share knowledge, to share decision-making processes, to do it locally and globally, then we have a problem with those organizations. And that very reason creates the context, creates the nest, the conditions for the next form of collective intelligence to emerge. Why do we have the internet? Why do we have what we call socialware and communityware? All these technologies happen today very, very, very fast because civil society and more people want to self-organize and to reach a level of social complexity that triggers, that facilitates much more capacities than what these organizations can do. But we don't have words for that. So I would like to share a little bit of these words. First, let's go into a little bit into visualizations here. I have put here the diagram of a pyramidal collective intelligent organization. Why do we have a pyramid here? Any idea? Just looking, just from instinct. I see some moves here. You see we have silos, for instance. Okay? Silos, concentration of communication. Okay? Now, if we make it, if we display this one, maybe you don't see it very well, but we have thousands and thousands of connection between people here. You have faces everywhere and connections. We have there on the left here, or on the right for you, sorry, the next form of collective intelligence that we call Holomiddle collective intelligence. Holomiddle. We had pyramidal, and now we have Holomiddle with holistic. Okay? This means that every person here can have a connection with everyone else. In the past, we could not. You needed either a hierarchical kind of connection and a spatial, into space, a physical kind of proximity. But now, anyone else can connect with anyone else. Today, I can keyword a word in Google or in a search engine and then connect with content created by people. Today, I can tweet something or look for some tweet feed and then connect with other people. So I can just type some kind of question or meaning and then instantly connect with other people in the world. Have we seen that in the past with social organizations? Never. The fact that in a symbolic way, I can create some meaning and then right away connect with people. We have never, ever seen that in the past. And so we can really look at the internet today. Now, if I take another shot and that, we can really look at it just like the rhizome. You see what we have underneath our feet in the forest. Something that emerges, that makes its connections. It doesn't have any top-down process of authority. However, it has a huge, huge, huge congruency. It really operates in and by itself. Another picture maybe of that? I don't know. Yes, we have, for instance, here a picture of the internet, like 10 years ago, kind of old picture. But it really, really shows something very, very similar with the brain. Our brain structure. Do we have a boss, like a top cell, saying the other cells how they should organize? You will do this job, and you will obey here, and so on and so on. No, of course. It self-organizes itself. Well, the human species now has taken this journey of self-organization. And more everywhere, we see what we call socialware or communityware as online tools for collectives to self-organize themselves. What I mean by that, make their own decisions, have a collective memory, resolve conflicts, make governance, whatever. Lots and lots of things that empower collectives where you don't have anymore a conflict between the individual level and the collective level. So that means restoring holopticism, augmented holopticism. I mean, these organizations more and more have a bigger, global, collective, augmented holopticism. And that, I have the awareness speaking right now that it may look very theoretical or very mental. But think for yourself what it means that we can, each of us, connect and have a sense of our social connections here, like in this room, but also online. And that it can even become more and more like a physical sensation. I train myself for that, like following at certain moments of the day some threads in Twitter or going to Facebook or other social networks, and not just look at the flow like, oh God, I gotta read all these things and that have my mind wander here and there and get just distracted by that. But what if I go with a very strong intention? First, I align myself. And then I ask myself, what do I want? What do I want to see? What do I want to create today or now? What question do I have? What do I want to accomplish? And then I may experience synchronicity. That means I have put a filter inside myself in the way I will keyword something in a search engine, or in the way I may think of something to share with my network, or in some question I may have some burning question. And then right away, or in the next few hours, some connections and some social process will happen. Have we known that before in the past? Never. So you see, we have something more than just a new culture here. We have something about the way our species designs itself. Very important. So I shared a little bit, I gave you those 4 names, remember? Swarm collective intelligence, original collective intelligence, the one we come from, pyramidal collective intelligence, that has enabled big numbers of people to do things together, and now the rising of Holomiddle collective intelligence. The way I share that looks very much like, how do we have collectives composed of individuals? That means the I in the we. You know, we have lots of I's, lots of people, and we make a we with governance and technologies and all these things. But you also have another aspect, more intimate and maybe more connected to the work that most of you do in this room, coaching. The we in the I. Let me give a few examples. Right now I speak English. I use a collective tool called a language. And that collective tool, in its structure, in its vocabulary, has built-in beliefs, has built-in ways to look at the world. And believe me, all these ways, all these structures do serve the present social order. It perpetuates the present social order, and I see nothing wrong with that. It has this function. I could say the same with social codes. Social codes, the way we say hi, the way we engage conversation, the way we sat ourselves in this room, everything about our behavior has a function. Well, why do we have this and not that? Why do we have such and such social code? It serves the current social order. And I see no issue with that, except that if we want to evolve, if we enter into this new kind of collective intelligence, Holomiddle collective intelligence, then we don't have much of a language for that. We don't have much of social codes. We don't have much of inner representations, how we see the world from that perspective. And all of those things we need to invent them. We need to create them, not just to exist as passive victims of them, but to become very active players into this. So let me now share a few examples of how I do explore that, because one thing that I didn't share, I made myself my first lab, my guinea pig. You see it here. So I made myself a victim of myself all the time. And I decided to explore new architectures, new ways in the eyes. For instance, how can I evolve language? What deficiencies do I see in today's language? And I made a choice, one step at a time, one big step for myself. I decided I would speak not in English anymore, but in a derivative of English, E prime. Have you heard about that? E prime, like, a function prime, that means a derivative of a function. I don't use the verb to be. I haven't used, unless I made a mistake, but I haven't used the verb to be since I speak with you. Have you noticed that? No? Yes. Okay. Why would I do that? Well, if I say, Isabel is shy, what happens? She is. Right? I don't care about your opinion. She is this or that. Okay? So it has two consequences. The first, on myself, because I disconnect myself from me making that experience to myself, or having that experience within myself, like seeing Isabelle as shy. And of course, I don't give you the choice. It just exists like that, into its isness. It has an isness quality, okay? So when I say things are, or this thing is, or this person is, then I disconnect myself and I force onto people some kind of external reality for which we have nothing to say about. And you may have a different opinion, and then we may start to argue, but then you see we have some very embedded forms of little violence, maybe not the big war, but something that starts to create separation between people. The other thing about using the verb to be, when I use the verb to be or not to be, binary. That means I describe reality in a binary way, things that are and are not. Do we really think that reality has just a binary nature? Can't it have some kind of flow, impermanence, things that change all the time? So you see, if I want to evolve my language, I have to question some very old structures like that. And I decided to make my own step by suppressing the verb to be in my language. And then it had some consequences for me and for others. First consequence for me, my own way to build my own reality through language has changed, has shifted dramatically. And then the other consequence with people, I just take responsibility for what I say. I don't impose an isness onto people. And that means it has deactivated lots and lots of issues with people. It has created lots of peace. And I don't say it solves everything. I just take that as one little step that questions the very fundamentals of our inner structure. If we want to evolve, if we want to think the next possibilities, then we want to have a very rational approach, questioning, okay, from the old world, what serves the old world, what do I want to keep, and what do I want to leave behind? And that requires a very, very important self-discipline. I'll take a second example. And I could go on, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. Social codes. So when we in our countries and most cultures that I know about, when we see people having a conversation, they can easily interrupt one another. And even if they don't interrupt one another, they just, boom, speak right, after another, like a ping pong game. It goes very fast. It doesn't leave much space for silence. Or when we see silence, we have some sense of unease, something goes wrong, right? Having a group of people and not saying something or unless we have a meditation group. But in conventional conversation, usually silence doesn't have much space for it. So I decided in my life that I would, in most cases, when I think of it, before I speak, I would take a deep breath. And believe me, I guess that burning myself, like immolating myself. Do we say that in English? Immolation by fire, I think makes it an easier experience. Very, very, very hard. Because I could see the depth of the training I received through education that we have to speak right away. And then operate from automated pilot. Now, if I speak after a deep, long breath, then it gives me time for lots and lots of things. Meditation. Because in one breath we can meditate. I can deactivate all the urges that I may have to make my point, that people need to hear me. I may sense my body and listen to my body feeling, my emotions. What happens here? I may also allow myself to channel, to receive inspiration. I may feel all the people I have in front of me also, just by this deep breath. And of course, in most cases, in conventional conversation, people will just speak and I won't say anything. They'll take the floor. So they don't need me. So then I can keep thinking, meditating, or do something else. That also helped me go into my right placement all the time. Because if people ask me to speak, then I will only speak with permission. So I give you this example because you see, I just changed one social code, not 10,000, just one. And it changed my whole life, but also it changed the whole way I relate with people, and it had lots and lots of ripple effects with other people and so on and so on. So you see, thinking about collective intelligence, we can think it, of course, in terms of system and governance and new technologies. And yes, oh yes, we have to do that. We do definitely want to think about coding and machines and how we become creators of that and not just victims of that. But we also want to take that question in our very, very flesh, in our body, because changing language or shifting social codes or food or our relationship to time leads to a very, very, very physical experience. So I guess you can call that, give a name to that. We could call it invisible architectures. You see, architecture, for instance, why do we stand in this room? We wanted to have an event called a meeting, a conference, and so this room has the perfect kind of architecture. It allows for the emergence of that. And we can do, of course, lots of other things. Maybe not sleeping, not very good for sleeping, or maybe not very good for eating right now. We would need tables or maybe a different architecture. So you see, physical architecture provides some doors and walls or possibilities and impossibilities, just like the rules of a game. And from that, you have a level of social emergence. Some kind of experience will likely happen in the way you design physical architecture. It works exactly the same with the way you design social codes, the way you design language, the way you design your relationship to time, the way you design a social ware or community ware, the way you design a currency. Do we want a scarce currency that triggers artificial scarcity? And then we will likely have pyramidal organizations. But if we want distributed organizations, then conventional money becomes a toxic technology. And then we want to create other forms of currencies. And with my research groups and research network, we really, really have committed ourselves to creating the post-monetary technologies as part of that. But you see, all these things belong to what we can call invisible architectures. So I would like to finish with some questions, because that leads lots and lots of questions. I would say 3 key questions. The first question, I want to ask it to people doing coaching in this room, and I guess most of the persons sitting here in this room. You see, what I have seen, I don't operate as a coach myself, of course, but what I have observed so far, and I can make a mistake, most of the coaching happens in this world here. Original collective intelligence. How do you behave with your team through team building or with your peers? How do you behave with your family, with people physically around you every day? Well, you have lots of coaching there. How do you operate as a team, like team performance, for instance, or as a one individual? Other form of coaching, of course, that I see with organizations, how do you operate as a company, Pyramidal? You have coaches that will help top execs, pharaohs, or coaches that will help teams around here to operate, or coaches that will help individuals here to experience a better life, to have a different relationship with their environment. But I would like to question now, do we have coaches that can operate here as well? That means coaches that can facilitate the emergence of Holomiddle collective intelligence, Holomiddle organizations, but also coaches that can help this guy here to evolve, maybe from here to here. So maybe you have a new path to explore in your work for those of you who like it, who feel attracted by this journey. And you can also ask that for ICF itself. ICF definitely does not belong here, does not belong there. I don't think you have chains of command there, but certainly belongs in something between the two. Because here, well, okay, we still need lots of technologies and new practices. So I don't think it has purely this kind of structure. It probably has a little bit of everything, okay? But that really leads to the question like, how do we develop holopticism in ICF, for instance? Or if you coach organizations or people in organizations, how can you have holopticism or augmented holopticism there? How can you empower individuals to understand this kind of culture, not just as a concept or social design, but what it means as an individual to operate in a holoptical context? So first question, again, can we coach this process? Can we coach the transition here? The second question. You see, until a recent number of years, we just lived in the physical world. We had neighbors, families, colleagues, the city, just a physical world that we can see with our biological senses. Now, we have a biological life and an online life, a biological self and a digital self, both. Of course, we just experienced the beginning of that, but more and more we know that if we want individualized people, local and global organizations, interconnected in a systemic way, with shared resources, including ecosystems and all these things, we have a huge amount of complexity that requires some kind of online life. So we may say, oh, we lose ourselves, look at our kids, they just spend their time playing on their iPad and so on. Okay, we may complain and just operate as victims there. Or we may also decide, hey, maybe we want to invent new social codes there, new architectures, new behaviors. What about making my online persona a happy online persona? A harmonious, efficient online persona? So maybe also we may think about the future or the evolution of coaching also in this side. We have lots of these things here. How much do we have there in the online world? The digital self, the online self. So, second question. And third and last question, the body, the physical body. I insisted on that, and I would really want to make it the third question. You see, we may become very mental, very conceptual in looking in the future, talking about Holomiddle collective intelligence, talking about governance, talking about technologies. But all these things really become real when they descend in the body. Because you will evolve your language, because you will use technologies just like we use our car, for instance. A car, we have a physical experience of a car. In the past, people did not have that. Well, we can also have a very, very, very physical experience with the online world if we train ourselves from that. If we just don't say, sitting in front of our machine and lose ourselves there. What kind of physical experience can I build in the online world? What will it take to shift my language so that it does not carry the old structures that we don't want anymore? So I ask these questions for yourself. Like, what do you feel attracted? What do you feel ready to do in your flesh in order to make this transition? Because that transition has a very, very, very strong body side, fleshy side. And if we have this awareness, then things become much easier. So thank you. I'd like to stop here for putting the things on the table. And of course, I feel super happy to share, have some feedback from you, questions, comments, whatever you would like to share. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Jean-François, I'm just curious about your thoughts on holacracy and relationship between what you're doing and the emerging work of holacracy.
Holacracy, yes. We see lots and lots of new techniques that facilitate new forms of governance, and holacracy really belongs to one of them. Very, very powerful. Holacracy, you also have sociocracy, and you have other techniques that really help new forms of governance. I see them as intermediary steps between pyramidal, because we still want people in pyramidal organizations to make their moves for the most part. So it really helps pyramidal structures that have the pyramidal culture to make very, very important steps and start to prepare themselves for a shift and become more distributed with more distributed decision making and so on. So I really value very much holacracy. Thank you for pointing it.
Sorry, it may be a silly question, but I didn't get the fleshy part of the internet, and there's a question mark for me there.
I didn't get it too. No. Okay, so yeah, I should say it in a more concrete way. Maybe a little bit of my own practice there. For instance, when I have long hours in front of a computer, I have made some design for myself, like every 15 minutes, I will stop for 10 minutes and make some moves or something else, you know, clean the room or jump or push-ups or whatever, but something with my body. And then I can also question, what do I want to do for the next 50 minutes? Social codes. I created a social code for myself. And that really shifts the whole thing compared to just doing, you know, 4 hours in a row without moving or just having a tea and continuing and just getting my whole psyche absorbed in the online world. So I try to stay present to that. Another thing, for instance, you may try to work mostly standing up in front of your computer, your laptop. So that means you keep your freedom and you don't, you know, have very bad positions. But that means you can put some music and dance and allow your body to move, which you can hardly do on a chair. Another example, when we have online conferences on Skype or Hangout or any software where you have people in different parts of the world, in different spaces, we usually start with a moment of silence and meditation. Then we go into the being part, like we offer to the center our present experience in our life right now. What state do we have? What do we want to talk about our being, not about the topic of the meeting. And then we have the doing part, and then we have a closing session and so on. So we had to invent that as a new possibility, a new social code. Can we bring something in the online world where we have a body sensation, a body feeling? And I would say the last thing here, let's say I want to ask a question, important for me. Let's say a question about, should I, you know, quit my job, for instance? I have that burning question. Okay, well, I can just make it a question like that, or I can try to align myself, see how I formulate the question, and learn how to use these different social tools, you know, through Quora or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, any kind of all these technologies that exist here and there. And just by aligning myself and sitting in my body, just maybe what I would do like in a room, that will change the whole experience. And I don't say I have the whole recipe here. I just share like few, you know, things that I tried for myself and with others, and so far they work. But I guess my message here, I think each of us, we should try something, because we don't have yet social codes for this world. We have to invent them. And you're in the room who operates so much in the human side of it. Why don't we learn how to design also those things so we can have a good, powerful online self and online experience? Does that feed your question?
Well, I'm referring to the first question that you posed on how can we help the transition from a collective intelligence that is in a pyramid to one that is on a network-based. And also the world is moving on that direction with the internet and digitalization of everything that's around us. I wonder what would be the role of the coaching on that area too. And we say transitioning to what? Already as a coaches, we are focusing, and I think we've got a novel purpose in our activity to help people get in touch with their own presence, with their own being, physically, as they are on this world, on this earth. And now, suddenly, we feel like we have to push that towards a digital being. Are we kind of artificially moving the society towards a world that takes everybody away from themselves. And in that context, what is it going to be our role in there? Transitioning them towards that world, or raising a consciousness towards what that world means and what's going to be our position on it? So that's my question.
And if you allow me or not, I don't know, I will say something very nasty. Ouch. With earlier conversation with the organizing team, I said, you know, I usually don't like that much to speak only with people in the coaching world, because they have spent so much time in the human side, but many of them reject technology, or they say it has something artificial. I don't say you say that, by the way. I don't make that projection on you personally. But I do have this experience of having done, you know, lots and lots of seminars, for instance, and many attendees of those seminars had this job of coaches. And you had wonderful people in a physical space. And they all agreed that, okay, one physical space in original collective intelligence, we know it, but how do we do the big thing without making it pyramidal? And so we need to learn technologies. But then they got really, really upset or scared or just rejecting technology. So I don't think we have anything artificial when we talk about the digital self. We have something to create. I think we can have very, very rich life with, not or, but and, with a physical life and an online life. But that doesn't come from the sky. It will come from our creation, from our imagination. And there, I see that we have lots and lots of opportunities as coaches to facilitate that, because we don't have, you know, the white book for that, or the, you know, the user manual for that. It really comes as even an artistic creation, I think, not just in a problem-solving mode, but something you can really try joyfully and see, how can I have my physical presence in connection to myself, and at the same time, I connect with, you know, lots and lots of other people online. So I guess your question does not have an answer per se. I think it just invites us to become very, very creative there. Thank you.